Welcome to this Jeremy Bamber and White House Farm podcast season 4 and our final episode in our mini-series of Police Lies. We pick up here now with myself and Yvonne talking about Detective Superintendent Michael Ainsley. Last but not least, there were a lot of police officers obviously that touched on this case that were involved in some way. Not all, will be corrupt, not all have been dishonest, but we need to move on now to Detective Superintendent Ainsley.
Michael Ainsley.
So tell me about Ainsley.
So, as we've said earlier, Ainsley was only brought into the case as a senior investigating officer from the 6th of September. So, after he became senior investigating officer, the whole dynamics of the case changed. Now, that's not to say Taft Jones' investigation was inferior or anything like that. He did his job, but because it wasn't giving the outcome that the family wanted, who Ainsley, by the way, was very close to.
Yeah.
Ainsley's put in charge. Then everything changed. Julie Mugford arrested and saying that Jeremy told her a year ago he was going to do this and gave all different scenarios. I mean, obviously, we've already got a podcast on Julie Mugford, and we'll speak about her lies in another episode. But it just changed. Ainsley was absolutely out to get Jeremy in court.
Yeah.
He lied to the DPP in order to get Jeremy charged. It's like what that man did was absolutely appalling, absolutely disgusting. We extracted everything that he'd done, that's malfeasance in public office. So we initially sent the complaint against Ainsley to Essex Police, who took forever. They wouldn't do anything about it, obviously, and they just came back, no further action, nothing, there's nothing wrong there. We sent it to the IOPC, who last year came back to us and says, actually, Essex Police have done this all wrong. Why have they done this all wrong and not investigated it as they should have done? Because they know damn well that Ainsley was corrupt and what he did. But we have sent the complaint to the CCRC. They have that. So, and there are countless instances, but obviously we can't go into all those today. We will do a podcast on Ainsley. It's just we're being a little bit, because we've had the IOPC going on and because it's still with this Criminal Case Review Commission and they haven't looked at it yet. We don't want to
say too much.
too much at the moment, but there are some instances that we can discuss. One particular that is an absolute lie that we can prove is a lie is on the foster care issue.
Yeah.
So obviously on the day of the incident, Jeremy was asked at a later date if he could recall anything from what the discussion was between Sheila and her parents around the kitchen table, and Jeremy said, oh well, it was about potentially fostering the boys. He said he didn't say about and joining it, he just heard that was the theme.
Yeah.
Well, Ainsley denied this, categorically denied that this conversation. Jeremy was a liar, this never took place.
Yeah, he just made it up. The information had come from Jeremy, and Jeremy alone, I think, was pretty much his words verbatim, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the relatives obviously backed Ainsley up on this. Oh no, they would have never done that. They would have not. Junior would never have put the children into foster care. It's a preposterous, So Ainsley
that must have been, just to say to a jury, that must have been really damning against Jeremy, because it would have looked like he just an absolute lie. And so why would Jeremy lie about that to make it look like it was Sheila? That would be damning for a jury to hear, that he was the only source to say that was a possibility, or that discussion took place.
Yeah, so obviously the jury's going to think, oh, he's a right liar, he's just inventing all this, what's he inventing, But it's like Ainsley, in his first report to the DPP on the 25th of September, set this out, this foster care issue, and that it was a complete lie, and Jeremy was the only source of it, and everybody he'd spoken to denied that this would ever happen. Then in November, he wrote his final report to the DPP. So this was the one that would then have Jeremy committed for trial. He'd already been arrested, so this was on his committal for trial for the DPP. And in capital letters, Ainsley wrote, Jeremy Bamber was the only source of this. Nobody else on the planet. But yet, Ainsley had
And everybody, not
statements.
only that, everybody else thought it was, like you say, a preposterous idea.
Appalling. Would never, ever in a million years, this would never happen.
And specifically saying, about Colin Cathell, the father, as well, wouldn't.
Yeah, that he wouldn't have allowed it to happen
Yeah.
and everything. But unknown to the DPP, Ainsley had collected statements. There were police actions to get statements from previous foster carers of Nicholas and Daniel, from social workers that were working with Sheila, from Colin Cathell's mother that said she'd spoken to June about potentially fostering the children. And now, in the Hardy Blake article in the New Yorker, it turns out that Barbara Wilson, who was the farm secretary, knew from day one that foster care was a potential issue.
Jim was talking to her about the potential fostering of the boys.
Exactly.
And also in Colin Cathell's statement, I mean, he doesn't say, all he says is, he doesn't say that he disbelieves that conversation took place. He just said, well, clearly everyone forgot about me. When they're talking about foster care, they're forgetting about me. So Colin has never said, oh, that is absolutely ridiculous. They wouldn't have talked. They'd know I would have the boy. He didn't even say that in his statement. He just said, well, they're talking about foster care, and obviously they're just forgetting about me. So
I mean, the foster care
why?
The foster care that the boys had wasn't permanent foster care or temporary. It was
Not as
more
drastic as it sounds, is it? Yeah.
Well,
So
it's still foster care. It was discussed. Jeremy was not making this up. Pamela Buffalo knew about it. There were so many people that knew about this issue, but yet Ainsley deliberately, intentionally, and maliciously lied to the DPP about this. The jury had a right to know that, yes, the boys have been fostered. It's no biggie. It's not like
really helping Sheila out, weren't they?
It
wasn't that boys were being taken away from Sheila. They were just helping Sheila out. So they were having them like day foster care and that sort of thing. So it's not like they're saying, we're going to remove your children from your care and they're going to go into foster care and you're never going to see them again. That wasn't the discussions. It was day foster caring. And if the jury had been told that, if all they had been told was the boys had received this day foster care in the past, then what Jeremy's saying, that just then becomes far more believable that conversation could have taken place, as opposed to them thinking Jeremy's just made up an outrageous story to try and make it sound like Sheila went over the edge.
Why would Ainsley want to cover that up? It can only be for malicious reasons, because he didn't want Sheila painted out as that she could hurt the children. He needed the jury to think Jeremy was a liar about everything, so that they would believe everything that Julie said. In fact, at trial, the judge said, you can either believe Jeremy Bamber or you believe Julie Mugford. And if you believe Jeremy Bamber, he didn't do it. And if you believe Julie Mugford, then he did. So that Ainsley put everything in place to create Jeremy is a liar everywhere he could.
Yeah, and it's not about truth and justice, is it? It's about getting a conviction at all costs, regardless of that.
Exactly.
So what else are you allowed to say about Ainsley and his conduct?
Well, another thing regarding statements, because I've just said he had statements from foster carers and social workers, but he also had statements from other individuals that he presented these other statements, not the foster care ones. This is on a different sort of section of the report, but he had other statements in which he was pursuing the prosecution case. He was like, Jeremy's this, Jeremy's that, Jeremy's the other. Here's a statement from this police officer, that police officer, the other police officer. Except he even gave the page numbers of those statements to the DPP. But the one problem that we've discovered is that the statements didn't exist on the day he went to the DPP with those paginated numbers. They were written afterwards. Now, why? Why were they not written before he went? No, they were written after he went. But yet we've never had, we've had on the Homes Index, we've had a breakdown of those statements. In some instances, we've had the statements, but they don't say what Ainsley said they said. So it's like him and statements I don't know. And we know they were being edited by Jones, because in one of Ainsley's event log entries, where he was instructing officers what to do on particular days, it's more than half a dozen, I can't remember the exact number, but on more than half a dozen instances on the event log, Ainsley is saying about DS Jones editing statements. What's that about?
I mean, you shouldn't have a police officer who was going to, looking for something to arrest Bamber for, editing statements.
No. And besides that, the statements we've had disclosed are not signed. We haven't got
not signed statements, and also there's withheld statements from Jeremy's friends as well. So it feels very much there's something like at least 14 statements from Jeremy's friends that have been withheld. So they're getting statements, picking statements that make Jeremy look bad, and potentially hiding statements that paint a very different picture of Jeremy. I mean, there are in the New Yorker article, there are statements where, the public perception of Jeremy was that he wasn't upset at the funerals, he didn't care about he was all carefree and wasn't bothered by the death of his family and all of that. But of course, there are statements in existence that people probably don't even know about. They just believe that that's what Jeremy was like, which says that he was, he was anything but. Yeah,
Exactly.
he was, medicated. He was drugged up on Valium. He was drinking and he was taking marijuana as well. He was he was a 24-year-old man self-medicating, or he did get the Valium from the doctors, but he was self-medicating, trying to cope with the loss of his family. And other people were honest about that and saw that. People said, he was had his eyes popping out of his head. He had the weight, the world on his shoulders. He was incredibly upset. So there's all these other statements that contradict the statements from people that had reason to lie about him or their friends.
Exactly. And we know that they exist because they set out on the Homes, what I keep saying about the Homes Index, it's the police national computer, and all the statements are on there, and they use it, well, all the time these days, but it was quite new in Jeremy's case, and the documents were put on by Stoke and Church in 2002 onto the Homes computer. So they were obviously involved in the inquiry before the appeal, but they had no knowledge of which statements they should or should not include in that Homes Index. So we know those statements exist.
Yeah.
It sets out who they are. So, and it sets out the date the statement was made. We haven't got them. They had them because they have to list them, but we've never had them. So why? The jury weren't aware of them.
Well, I imagine, I mean, we haven't got them, so we don't know, but I imagine they paint a very different picture of Jeremy to the one that Ainsley, Jones, Miller, Cook, and the rest of them wanted.
Well, it's odd, isn't it? Because they're all the friends of Jeremy.
Yeah.
All his friends have made statements.
What do you know? Yeah.
And where are they? We don't have them. Because they didn't fit the police narrative. They wanted him to be this nasty, corrupt man who was corrupting Julian Mugford, who'd murdered 2 little boys and his family, and he didn't care, and he was just
carefree. Yeah.
That's the image they wanted to paint, and that's the image they set out to create.
And they did, and they've done it very successfully because people still believe it 39 years later.
Successfully up to now.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
The jury had a right to know, and that's one of the purposes of these podcasts, is so that we can get the truth out there, because people who take the time to listen to them will see that not everything they've been told in the past on documentaries and in books is the actual truth. So
no, it's just rumor upon rumor upon rumor that becomes legend, myth and legend, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So what about after the conviction and Ainsley then retires from the police force. What happens then?
Oh, well, you see, though, Robert Bowflowers, Jeremy's uncle, was so grateful for the help that Ainsley had provided in getting Jeremy convicted that he offered him a job on the family caravan park as head of security. And
Now,
Ainsley
head of security,
accepted.
really, well, he was the only security guard, wasn't he?
He was the security guard, yeah.
A security guard. And what's interesting about this is at that time, Jeremy was still part owner in the OC Road Caravan Park. So he would get the annual accounts and the information about how that was doing. So this, I think, is probably how it was discovered that Ainsley was actually earning double the office manager as a glorified security guard.
Yeah.
Very handsome salary for
And basically, Jeremy was paying his
Ainsley's.
salary. So it's like, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
You couldn't make it up. And Jeremy made a complaint at the time because, you know, it just sounds so incredibly dodgy, you know, for want of a better word. But then nobody cared, did they?
No, nobody cares. And it's like, ever since that image that the police set out, and particularly Ainsley and Jones and Cook and Miller, who are the four key ones we've spoken about today, they created this image of the person they wanted to create. And to be honest, they did a cracking job because people still believe that Jeremy is still that character that they created nearly 40 years ago.
Yeah, and that's I think the emphasis is on that they created. They created that. This wasn't accurate. If you were to, those statements from Jeremy's friends were to be released, then even some of the statements that are in there, still paint a very different
even if I mean, these 8 statements of Julie Mugford we've never had. If they'd just been honest, and if they'd just been honest about what they'd done at the crime scene, even there would never have been a trial, because the crime scene proved that Jeremy wasn't culpable of anything.
And I think on that note, Julie Mugford, we are going to do a special episode dedicated just to her and how easy it really is to actually pick her story apart and prove that she is absolutely the liar in the case. And had the jury known what we know now, then that instruction from the judge, do you believe Jeremy or do you believe Julie, would have gone very, very differently. So we will be doing a podcast in the near future all about Julie Mugford's lies. There is a podcast already out there in season 1 about Julie Mugford, but we will look specifically at her statements that we do have, and you know what she did in court, how she answered questions in court, and we can prove that she perjured herself in court. And we will do that in an episode very soon.
We will do that, Emma.
So thank you for joining me, and I will speak to you again really soon, Yvonne.
All right, Emma, take care. Speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to join our mailing list for the latest updates on the case as they happen, please email us via our website www.jeremy-bamber.co.uk.